Alright, so let's take a look at your homework. Alright, so on page 554, I asked you to do 13 to 33 even. Take a look at these, or 13 to 33 odd. So, to get started, let's take a look at number 15. Number 15, it says f of x is equal to 4 over x minus 1 times x plus 5. Nothing's going to cancel, so our first step of factoring isn't going to produce any wholes. Vertical asymptotes would be when the denominator is equal to 0. So when x is 1 and when x is negative 5. Move on to the horizontal asymptote. Well, the top power and the top power is 0, the bottom power, if we distribute everything out, it'd be 2. So we'd have a horizontal asymptote of 0. So let's start graphing this. This one's at 1. Then we have one at negative 5. And then we have a horizontal at 0. Okay. So in order to figure out the branches, we're going to be plugging in values to the left and right of these. So let's try negative 6. Try negative 4. Try 0, and we'll try 2. I'm going to store this into my calculator. The way I'm going to type this in is 4 divided by parentheses x minus 1 times x plus 5. So that way the calculator knows that whole thing's in the denominator. It's 4 divided by, let's see here. Okay, so if I store negative 6, my calculator's telling me it's 0.6. If I type in negative 4, my calculator's telling me it's negative 0.8. If I type in 0, calculator's telling me it's negative 0.8. And if I type in 2, this would be 0.6. So we get close to the asymptotes on the ends. In the middle, they're both in the bottom, so that's why the graph would look like that. Let's take a look at some of the other odd numbers. All right, so 25 caught my eye. Let's take a look at that one. So for number 25, it says f of x is equal to x squared minus 36 over x plus 6. First step that we always do is we try to factor. It's a difference of perfect squares. Everyone should be able to do that. You can see that these factors of x plus 6 are the same. So what we do is we make it equal to 0, and there's a hole when x would be equal to negative 6. And what we're left with is we're just left with the simplified equation f of x is equal to x minus 6. This is obsolete because we factored and we have a simplified form. The way we graph x minus 6, the y-intercept is negative 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up 1 over 1. And with this hole being at negative 6, we go down to the graph and we put a hole. That's what the graph would look like. So that's number 25. Let's see, number 31 is the same, and number 33, they're all pretty much the same. What else did I ask you to do? 1 and 2. Alright, so maybe I'll do number 33, and I'll do number 2 on the practice worksheet. So number 33, it says f of x is equal to x minus 1 over x squared minus 4. So our first step is we try to factor. And if anything cancels, we get a whole. But that wouldn't happen here. So there's no holes. We're going to go to step number 2. Vertical asymptote would be when the denominator is equal to 0. We could factor or just solve it. Either way, you'd get x is equal to plus or minus 2. And for your horizontal asymptote, top power is 1, bottom power is 2. So this would just give us a horizontal asymptote of y equals 0. As far as what this graph looks like, now what we're going to do is draw our branches. So I'm going to type into my calculator. In my calculator, I'm using a TI-30. I'm going to type in a minus 1 divided by a squared minus 4. And if we plug in negative 3, I'm getting negative 0.8. If we plug in negative 1, I'm plugging in values to the left and right of each vertical asymptote. I get 0.6. If I plug in positive 1, I'm getting 0. And then if we plug in 3, I'm getting 0.4. So on the outsides, the graph's going to look like this. I'm just a little unsure here because I did get 0. So what I'm going to do is instead of just plugging in 1, I'm just going to be on the safe side and just plug in 1.5. Let's see what that is. That'll help determine if it's a parabola or a cubic function. So I plugged in 1.5 and I'm getting negative 0.3. So it's definitely a cubic function. Okay. And I'll do one more. Taking a look at your homework number 2 in practice 9.1. It says y is equal to 3 over x plus 1, x minus 1. Okay, so for our first step, it's already factored. Nothing's going to cancel. Second step, to get our vertical asymptote, we set the denominator equal to 0. X would be negative 1 and x would be positive 1. Third step, the horizontal asymptote. The top power is 0. The bottom power would be 2. So we would just get y equals 0. Now the vertical asymptotes are kind of close together. So what we're going to use is we're just going to use decimals. It's not a big deal. So what I'm going to do in my calculator is I'm going to store negative 2. I'm going to store negative 0.5, positive 0.5, and then positive 2. Now let's see what happens. If we store 3 divided by parentheses, another parentheses, mem variable a plus 1 times a minus 1. I'm going to store negative 2. My calculator is saying that that would be 1. If I store 2, I get positive 1. If I store negative 0.5, I get negative 4. If I store positive 0.5, I'm getting negative 4. Both below, looks like a parabola. Stay tuned for today's lesson.